Hello, I'm Marcia Kavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Well, 2020 kept piling on this week when, among things popular, Drew Brees and the city's Carnival parades went down. We will examine those losses as well as disturbing numbers in COVID cases and Cedric Richmond leaving Congress for the White House. 30 years ago last month, the modern gambling era began in Louisiana. We'll look at its impact and we will investigate the prospects for clean energy production in the state's future. Joining us are tonight's Informed Sources, Errol Laborde, producer of Informed Sources, and from the Times-Picayune and the New Orleans Advocate, Gordon Russell, managing editor for Investigations, Stephanie Grace, political columnist, and Tyler Bridges, reporter and author of the 2002 book about gaming in the state, Bad Bet on the Bayou, The Rise of Gambling in Louisiana and the Fall of Governor Edwin Edwards. All right, we're going to go over to Gordon first. And COVID update, it's really not what we want to hear.
No, and I mean, this is sort of entirely predictable. The whole country's been swept by this third wave, this autumn wave from coronavirus that's been predicted almost since the beginning. And we've been resisting it for a while here in Louisiana. We've been one of the few places that hasn't been hit that badly until recently. And it's, just sort of has washed across the whole country, and it's gotten here now too. And the numbers are clear that we're in our third wave of this, really. We had an early peak at the very beginning, right after Mardi Gras, mostly around New Orleans. Then we had a second peak in the summertime, mostly in other parts of the state. And now we seem to be on the upswing of a third peak, which has not quite reached the levels of the other two yet, but which continues to climb. And we've been having, several thousand new cases a day. All the trend lines are bad. One of the more worrisome indicators is hospitalizations have been going up at a pretty rapid rate. We're getting close to 1,000 people hospitalized in Louisiana with coronavirus. The governor, John Bel Edwards, says we're in danger of exceeding our capacity with hospitals. And again, this has been worse than other parts of the state, not in and around New Orleans, but it has been rising here. We've also there's a little bit of a data quirk in New Orleans where Tulane has been doing a lot of the testing in New Orleans to keep things down at the university, which is great, but it sort of skews our numbers. And what you end up with is a high number of negative tests coming out of Tulane, which could have the effect of masking things a little bit, at least when you look at the positivity rates. And with the Tulane kids leaving, they're all going home essentially now for Thanksgiving for the rest of the year. You could see our positivity rate go up as a result of that because we'll be seeing less testing, but more of the people who are getting tested are likely to be positive at this point.
So in
it's kind of a shame. Go ahead.
Okay,
yeah.
in our metro region, what area is seeing the highest rates come in, would you say?
I'd have to look at the parish by parish numbers. It's not New Orleans. It's more in the suburban
Parish is pretty
parishes.
high. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, some of this could have to do with people's reaction to this. I mean, we've obviously had sort of the strictest restrictions in New Orleans of anywhere in the state, and we just went into phase 3.3 recently, and who knows how long that's going to last now. But we've been slower to reopen than some of the other places, and that may be paying some dividends, of course. But it also could be that phase 3.3 isn't going to last very long. We've had some of the lowest positivity rates in the state in New Orleans, which is a good thing. But I think we've got the holidays coming up, and that's another worrisome something else to worry about. It and of course, officials have been warning people to not do any unnecessary travel. And anecdotally, I've heard a lot of people talking about canceling Thanksgiving plans and Christmas plans and that sort of thing.
Right. Yeah, certainly. I have too. I think all of us are probably here learning about that. In the spring, of course, it just hit us, and we had to really scramble to tackle this thing. Are we better prepared now? We see the hospitalizations go up. Are our hospitals more equipped to handle this?
I think Unquestionably, there's been a lot of strides made. I mean, the treatments for the patients have improved dramatically, both the medicine that they're being given, and there's been less of a rush to put people on ventilators, which was proven to not be that effective in a lot of cases. So I think the percentage of people who are dying when they're hospitalized with coronavirus is down pretty substantially because of these different therapies. And then I think obviously we've all gotten used to living with this virus, and we're smarter. Most of us are smarter about wearing masks, about limiting our contact with other people, and just kind of doing all the things you need to do to keep it down. I think the danger right now is we've got the great news is we have this really promising news on the horizon. We've got these two vaccines that look really like they might really work, but they're a little bit over the horizon still, and we have to be patient. And people are tired of all this. Obviously, I'm tired of it, and people are, there's evidence that people are slipping a little bit and having more house parties and those kinds of things, small gatherings that may be leading to infections. And it's like we all just have to buckle down. You hate to see people get sick and even die in this phase when you can almost hopefully see the finish line in sight. I mean, it's a little bit of ways, it's a ways off still, but you can tell there's going to be a finish line, or it sure appears there's a finish line. And that's the best news we've had in a while.
As you noted, you were just, less than a week out now from Thanksgiving. And so, we're being cautioned to make our gatherings small, if at all. No, no big gatherings, and just have a small Thanksgiving this year.
Yeah, and I think, it's, I'm sure you guys all have your own stories. I mean, my sister's family and mine get together every year. They're from Texas, and I think we've just decided to cancel that, and I'm sure a lot of people are going through the same, but, it seems like maybe it's just not worth it this year, and maybe we can get together in a few months.
Yeah, in a few months, and then hopefully everybody will have their big Thanksgiving for 2021. We'll pray that the vaccines work. All right, thanks a lot, Gordon. Tyler, we're going to head over to you. 30 years ago, boy, there was, a few years before that, obviously, there was debate raging in this state about legalized gambling. Well, they did it, and so how has it worked for us?
Yeah, and you used the word they, and it was originally Edwin Edwards who was pushing the casinos for New Orleans in his third term in the late 1980s, but it was actually under Buddy Roemer that the modern gambling era began, with the legislature in 1990 approving a lottery, and that was then approved by the voters of the state in October of 1990, and the idea was it was going to go for education. Well, the extra money for education was added at the top and then taken off at the bottom by legislators, so there's really no new revenue in net terms. And then in 1991, when Roemer was still governor, the legislature barely approved the legalization of 15 riverboat casinos and also video poker. I don't know that the public fully understood exactly what they were going to get. And you'll remember, Marcia, that the boats were supposed to cruise up and down the Mississippi River. Well, they pretty soon found reasons not to cruise. Maybe it was because it was dark. And the Harvey Canal, which is full of barges, the excuse was there that there were barges in the way. And then on the in Lake Pontchartrain, the Star Casino didn't want to go from the dock because of high wind. So all the boats...
Power lines too, right?
Power lines, yeah, that's right. You remember that, Stephanie.
All kinds of hazards.
All kinds of hazards. And so pretty soon the boats stopped sailing, and then they ended up being allowed to not cruise at all. And then more recently, the legislature has allowed the boats to actually move off the water if they want to onto land. And video poker started with the idea that this was going to be something that would cut down on the illegal gambling in bars. Again, not fully understood, but bars soon began getting the machines. And then throughout the state, we all now have a number of video poker casinos. And it's a very popular way for people to gamble in this state. And then, so that happened in 1991. And then in 1992, when Edwin Edwards had gotten in office, his big issue, remember, was the creation of the single land casino in New Orleans. That was approved by the legislature with a single vote in the House making the difference. And then there was all sorts of controversy, folks may remember, over who would get the license. And then a few years later, we have Edwin Edwards out of office, gets indicted for payoffs he had gotten for Riverboat Casino, spends 8.5 years in office. And meanwhile, the New Orleans casino opened, it went bankrupt, but now operated by Harris, the casino has has been a part of the landscape. And as I said, the riverboat casinos are there, and so are the video poker machines.
And Tyler, we're really also influenced by our neighboring states. What really sold the lottery was when Florida was having it. And you had all these stories about people going to Destin for the weekend and collecting people's money and buying tickets at the gas stations in Destin and coming back. And so Louisiana money was going into Florida to buy those. And then once Mississippi started with the dockside gambling, it looked kind of crazy. People could go to Natchez or to Vicksburg and gamble in a boat, but they couldn't cross the river and do it in New Orleans, in Louisiana. So it just didn't make sense anymore because the other states were doing it. The other thing about the keeping the boats dockside, the players didn't want the boat to go out either. I mean, if you're out there, you're there to gamble, and so you don't want to be cruising. And so, what if you're gambling, you want to go home, and you got a 2-hour cruise, and so you really could never really sell the idea unless those boats became dockside.
Yeah, no, all that is absolutely right. Certainly, there was a kind of let's keep up with the Joneses. Another point that obviously is that gambling became a way to raise more revenue without having to raise taxes. And now gambling provides about 5% of the state general revenue. So that is going to be about $600 million this year. So again, that's money that the state is able to collect without legislators having to approve taxes.
Well, real quick, Tyler, I mean, at first when this all came up, as I said, there was just raging opposition. It was a real debate about it. It happened, but it's more accepted now across the state, isn't it?
Yep, it's absolutely more accepted, and we saw that in 2 years ago when fantasy sports came up on the ballot, local option for each parish, and 47 of 64 parishes approved it. And then just this November 3rd, 55 of 64 parishes approved sports betting. So I think gambling 30 years later from the start has now become an entrenched part of the Louisiana political and economic landscape.
If you go to the parking lots for the casinos like in Lake Charles or Shreveport, you look at the license plates, they're all from Texas. And to me, there's a moral justification in taking money from Texas. You know, so that's
Okay, E, well, we're going to stick with you after that comment. Mardi Gras parades, we're not going to have them in the city of New Orleans at
It's
least.
kind of a sad week for people who care about Mardi Gras and who care about the city. And the news that developed today is that the Rex organization announced that it would not have a parade and it would not stage its carnival ball. And Rex carries a lot of weight in Carnival. If you take seriously its title of King of Carnival, and whenever there's been a crisis situation, the Rex people have quite often been in the lead. So I think what they did today is going to influence other people. Now, what Rex did say is that while they're not going to have a parade, not going to have a ball, they're keeping open the possibility of doing some other things. And this goes back to a meeting the mayor had a few weeks ago when she said the thing is, Carnival's not canceled, it could just be different. And she told the crews, come back like in December and give us some other ideas of things we can do. And we'll try to do it. We'll see if we can make it work within the guidelines. Now, I think all the crews thought that meant that they can go back and make plans. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue during the week, there was an announcement on the city's website under the frequently asked questions column about, are there going to be parades? And it said, no, the parades have been canceled, which is how a lot of people found out. And I know, like in Endymion, the day before, that an officer from Endymion was telling the media, well, we're going to try the parade. We're working on it. And then all of a sudden, there's this announcement that they've been canceled. And since then, Endymion has announced that it's canceled too. So we're seeing a lot of cancellations. We saw the Society of St. Anne, which is a walking group, a very popular group, announced today that it's going to cancel. What's next then is probably in the next few weeks, we're going to see what the crews came up with. There seems to be a willingness. The city doesn't seem to want the words to go out that Carnival is canceled in New Orleans. They want it to be Carnival is different in New Orleans, but something's going to happen. And so we're going to be hearing things. And one idea that sounds kind of crazy that people are talking about is moving the parades into the spring or into the summer, assuming that the vaccine's out and it's a lot safer. And you know, there's one thing. I mean, Mardi Gras is so much about tradition. The idea of having Carnival in August or July sounds strange, but I got to tell you, in the Caribbean, there are a lot of Carnival celebrations, and there are a few like Trinidad and some of the old school carnivals that do it in February at the possible Mardi Gras time. But there are a lot of islands that have their Carnival celebration in August. And the reason is that August is the down month for tourism. And February, they don't need Carnival in February because that's always a big month for the snowbird people from North America. And so there is a tradition of having Carnival celebrations at another time of the year, especially when it makes more economic sense.
What about in Jefferson Parish? Are they or aren't they with their parades? Do we know?
They haven't done yet. You know, Cynthia Lee Shank comes from a really Carnival tradition, and her dad used to ride in all the parades, and so I think she's really got it in her blood. But what she said, they haven't decided yet. But she did use this line that she cannot send Jefferson Parish workers out working the parade to a parade that she would not go to, that she would be afraid of going to. And so I think they want to wait a little bit more longer and get some more numbers. But if you look at the trend, if you look what's going on, it seems like they're going to be coming up with something else too.
Okay, E, I know, disappointing news for so many folks. Thanks a lot, though. Stephanie, over to you. And the only Democrat in Louisiana's congressional delegation is going to leave his seat.
He is, but for bigger and better things, it looks like. Cedric Richmond, the 10-year incumbent, represents the city of New Orleans in a district that kind of goes along the river up to Baton Rouge, announced he would be leaving the seat. He was just reelected, but this is not really a surprise, to join the Biden administration. So Cedric Richmond had been a national co-chair of Joe Biden's presidential campaign. So that's one reason why this was not, you know, a huge surprise. When we had that big, crazy primary with all those Democrats, Cedric Richmond was one of the people who very early on said, I think Joe Biden's the guy. I think he's the one who can beat Donald Trump. And he was very public about it. And it was when a lot of Democrats were kind of looking around saying, oh, look at all these, you know, there was such a big field, there were so many women, it was so diverse. And he said, no, I think we should go with, this is the choice. This is the way I think the party should go. Mitch Landrieu said the same thing, you'll remember early on. And the voters kind of came around to where he was, that Joe Biden had a few stumbles early on in the primary season, and then he had the big showing in South Carolina, and pretty soon everybody else had kind of fallen away. So Richmond ended up really in his inner circle as an advisor and a surrogate. And in the White House, he'll play a role. Some people are likening it to what Valerie Jarrett did in the Obama administration. She, of course, was an old friend of the Obamas who came and was a little bit of an all-purpose advisor. Senior advisor, he's also going to oversee something called the Office of Public Engagement. He's expected to be a liaison to Congress, of course, where he's served with, he's been head of the Congressional Black Caucus, so that's a link, that's an important link. He has a lot of ties to younger representatives who maybe didn't know Joe Biden in all those years he was in Congress. Something that's interesting, he also, and I think maybe a little overlooked, he is the only Democrat in the delegation, but he's got very strong ties to his colleagues who are Republicans. People like Steve Scalise is an old friend from the legislature. Garrett Graves, he has a very strong working relationship with. They both represent parts of Baton Rouge, that area. And so it's on issues that are important to the state, it's going to be a really big deal having somebody kind of in the room in the White House.
Really have the ear of the president.
Really have the ear of the president on, and, you know, flood insurance, disaster recovery, all kinds of issues that do cross party lines even in this very, very partisan environment.
Well, we wish him all the best in that new position,
yes.
But now who's going to take his seat?
Well, that's the question. We don't have an election date yet. Richmond said he would leave around the time of the inauguration in January. It could be March and April. There is kind of a set election date that could happen, but it's up to Governor John Bel Edwards. That hasn't stopped people from declaring. So we have a few announced candidates already. One is State Senator Karen Carter Peterson, who, of course, ran for the seat way back when against Bill Jefferson. Troy Carter, another Carter, who is no relation, who's also in the state Senate. He represents Algiers. He had been on the city council many years ago, also has run for the seat in the past. And then a whole bunch of people who could. A lot of people are talking about Helena Moreno from the city council. A lot of people are talking about Cleo Fields from the legislature up in Baton Rouge. And then there's kind of a whole other tier of people who are looking at it. All Democrats, I should say at this point. It's a very Democratic district, even though it was represented for 2 years by a Republican, Joe Gow.
Right.
I have a column about that in this weekend's paper, if anyone wants to kind of take a little trip back.
I mean, certainly a Republican can run.
A Republican can run. I would not have high hopes. Although, again, it can happen.
As it did, as you said, with Congressman Go.
Yes.
Yeah, if I could jump in just a moment, I was looking at some of the party registration and where the voters come from. You know, and Stephanie, I know you know this, that when the legislature redrew that district a decade ago, or almost a decade ago, that was a district was created to elect a black Democrat from New Orleans, and then we've had Cedric Richmond play that role, so that certainly it would give a black Democrat from New Orleans the advantage. Only 12% of the registered voters in that district live in Baton Rouge, which would seem to put Cleo Fields or anyone else from Baton Rouge at a big disadvantage.
Right. I mean, there is a theory that somebody from Baton Rouge could pick up votes from the river parishes because, of course, these districts have to be contiguous, so there's kind of a line that goes up through St. John's, St. James, all of those parishes. So,
and former St. John Parish president, wasn't it Natalie Rowbottom?
Yes,
she's another name in there.
Considering it. Jimmy Harris, who's in the legislature, who used to work for Cedric Richmond, a number of other legislators. A lot of people at this point are.
Gaines, yeah.
I'm sorry?
Randall Gaines, I think,
Gaines,
is another one.
So we'll see. It could be one of those seats where like a lot of people get in and then it's going to be a couple people winning by a little, or it could be that support coalesces behind one or two people.
So we'll see. That's coming down the pike. All right. Thanks a lot, Stephanie. Tyler, we're going to head over to you. We got the news that Shell's Convent refinery is going to be shut down. They're shutting that one down. You know, we're hearing more and more about clean energy, cleaner energy. Is Louisiana poised to sort of jump onto that?
Well, the state is poised to jump on it. It really hasn't been something that's been important for the state. You know, Louisiana's elected officials have always emphasized oil and gas, and in recent years, as states like California have moved ahead with clean energy, Texas jumping into wind, Louisiana has remained fixed on oil and gas. And certainly the legislature, we saw this during this past year, during the pandemic, has tried to give more tax breaks to oil and gas. But there are some opportunities to begin developing clean energy, and certainly with the election of Joe Biden as the next president, obviously that's a very, very important part of his portfolio of things that he wants to do, and obviously it wasn't so much for President Trump. But it's also worth remembering that oil and gas has become much less important over time. In 1964, when Governor McKithen was in office, oil and gas provided 57% of the state's overall revenues. And this year, it's down to about 4.5% of the state general revenue. And jobs have gone down. The number of barrels pumped per day, for example, of oil in Louisiana in 1977 was 772,000 barrels per day. Now it's down to 129,000 barrels per day. Now, natural gas has become more important. But all this has created an opportunity, particularly with the incoming president, to develop more of a clean energy sector.
And so energy companies, are they recognizing this? Are they moving toward cleaner energy and just ways to sequester carbon, reduce carbon emissions?
Yeah, Marcia, what we're seeing so far internationally is that the European companies are much more interested in doing it. And Shell, of course, is a company based in the Netherlands. And when they said they were going to close the refinery in Convent and cost about 1,100 workers their jobs, they said it was because they wanted to focus more on low carbon activities rather than an oil refinery. But Shell could be coming in here to do maybe more stuff that would be clean energy. BP potentially is another one as a European company. But it was very interesting that Tyler Gray, who heads the big oil industry lobby, and the two times that I've spoken to him in the last few weeks, he was very interesting to say that he did not take the very strong line of, let's say, Senator Bill Cassidy or President Trump against Joe Biden's comments about the need to promote clean energy. So Tyler Gray was talking about, hey, climate change is real and we need to look at alternatives as well. Okay,
we'll see where that takes us. Thanks a lot, Tyler. Over to football. A couple of minutes that we have left to talk about it. Drew Brees. Out for some games.
Drew Brees to take himself out of a game is big. I mean, you'd expect a medical person to say, Drew, you got to get out. But no, he went to the coach and say, I can't do the second half last week. He was really hurt. The Saints announced today that Taysom Hill, who's I think certainly a fan favorite, would be the starting quarterback. The other quarterback is Jameis Winston, who's there to be a backup quarterback and who played a little bit last week, and so it's between the two of them. It reminds a lot of people what happened last year when Brees was hurt. He missed 4 games, and Terry Bridgewater came in, and people said, "Oh no, what are we gonna do without Drew?" And they won all 4 games without him, and so it was an incredible turnaround. And Taysom Hill, who's the better quarterback between the two? I don't know, but Taysom Hill's a fun quarterback to watch because he runs, he passes, he catches. He probably catches the same thing he passes.
You're right.
Yeah,
I know,
yeah.
he's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and so it's an amazing thing. I think there's speculation. I doubt if he'll play the whole game. I think they might put Jameis Winston in on some plays, just as they were starting to do with Drew Brees, that Taysom Hill was going in on some of his plays. But if they can kind of pace, they have a fairly easy schedule for the next few games going into December, where they have a very tough game against Kansas City. And so if he's got to miss 3 or 4 games, these might be the 3 or 4 games.
But, he's really pretty amazing to have the broken ribs on both sides and also collapsed lung, but still he went in and did finish up the half.
And then apparently the couple of broken ribs from the previous week, he didn't even know that he had them. So.
Okay, well, gosh, all the best wishes to Drew. Heal fast. I can't believe that you went back in that game and finished off the half. Okay, guys, other stories in the news. Let's start with E.
Ascension Parish, which is known for towns like Donaldsonville and Gramercy, they're doing a marketing campaign. They're calling themselves Louisiana's Sweet Spot. That's because there's a big sugarcane industry. And you also have Homer's House, which is owned by a New Orleanian. And what they're doing, I think they're kind of positioning themselves for in a couple of years from now when the riverboats return. And I think they want to try to develop a big industry that attracts tourists based around sugar.
Okay. Stephanie?
Early voting started today for the December 5th runoff. DA, couple judgeships. There's a millage proposal in New Orleans. School board runoffs starts today, runs through next Saturday. Not Thanksgiving Day and not the Friday after.
All righty. Thanks, Steph. Tyler, real quick.
Yeah, and speaking of other elections, on December 5th, there is still a congressional race going on in Louisiana. It's up in mostly northeast Louisiana, those rural parishes, Monroe, but extends down to Alexandria and the Florida parishes. There are 2 Republicans that have advanced to the runoff. A state representative named Lance Harris got 17% on November 3rd, and then Luke Letlow, he got 33%, and he has been an aide to the outgoing Congressman Ralph Abraham.
Okay. All righty. Gordon, over to you.
Edwin Edwards, the former governor, was hospitalized this week for the 2nd time in a week with double pneumonia. He's 93 years old, so this was never a great thing to have double pneumonia. He was released from the hospital today, and he's said to be recovering, being treated with antibiotics.
Okay. All righty, guys. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you all for joining us, too. We'll see you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a very safe and happy Thanksgiving. Good evening.